Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. That's right. It's time for another episode of Pick Up and Deliver, shooting from the hip, triple shot. I don't know what noises that was, but there it is. So today I'm going to talk about 3 games that I've tried recently and tell you a little bit about them. First up is a game that I had on my shelf of opportunity for 4 years and like 6 months. So almost, getting closer to 5 years. This is a game that I got from Matt, last name redacted. I don't remember his last name. One of the hosts of the Gone But Not Forgotten podcast of Nonsensical Gamers. At one point, Matt was doing a cull of his collection, so he had a bunch of games that he was getting rid of, and he said if anybody who listened to the podcast was interested in them, those were we had first opportunity to buy what he was selling. And I noticed that he had this zombie game called Student Bodies. And being that I study zombies and play zombie games, I thought, I'll get that. That'd be fun. And so I emailed him to see about buying Student Zombies, and he just sent it to me for free. What a guy. That was super nice. And in acknowledgement of his generosity, I didn't play the game for 5 years. Which, isn't to say that I didn't want to. I just, it's a really vicious game, and it's from Smirk and Dagger, which if you know that company, they tend to make games that are all about like stabbing your friends in the back. And that just isn't a kind of game that gets a ton of play at my house. On top of that, zombie games tend to really get played mostly during my zombie class. But this year, I decided to make a concerted effort to get out Student Bodies and try to get it played. And so I brought it one of the weeks on the game day for my zombie class, and some of my students picked it. And so there we were, playing Student Bodies. So let me tell you about it. In Student Bodies, you play a group of high schoolers who are trapped in a high school full of zombies. Your town, the science teacher at your high school accidentally invented a zombie virus and infected the school. They also invented an antidote, however, which is awesome. Because the way this zombie virus works, you don't turn into a zombie until you're killed. If you die and you're infected, which at the beginning of the game everyone's infected, then you reanimate as a zombie. So the way the game works, you all start in the hallway of this high school, and you have to move through the hallway, dodging zombies, jumping over obstacles, maybe killing zombies. They're pretty easy to kill. Trying to get to the high school science lab. When you get there, there are going to be a bunch of beakers in the room. We were playing with a group of 4 players, so there were 7 beakers in the room. 4 of those beakers have the antidote. 3 of them have other things. Some are power-ups, some are poisons. You don't know till you drink them. Once you get an antidote, then you're done with the lab. Then you have to go back through the hallway, back down to the other end of the hallway where the fire escape doors are. You go out the door through an alcove and out the front door of the building. The first student to get an antidote and get out the front door of the building wins. It is a aggressively competitive game. You are not only allowed to fight the zombies, you're also allowed to fight the other players, because the whole point is to be the first student out of the school. If you get out of the school, you win. And in fact, you lock the doors behind you to keep the zombies in, meaning that your friends that get eaten too. Because it's an aggressively competitive game, and you know that from the outset, we all kind of go in with the same dog-eat-dog mentality, and it was a good time. They have a number of mechanisms in there that make it a lot of fun. The main one being that you have a bunch of cards, some of which only work on your turn, some of which work on opponents' turns. And at the end of every single person's turn, everybody draws back up to 5. So the game strongly encourages you to play cards that are allowed to be played during other people's turns, And those cards allow you to make the zombies stronger. They allow you to interfere with attempts at doing things on the part of the non-zombie player. It's great. Downsides, it's kind of fiddly and kind of long for what it is. It would be nice if it were a little smoother. The rules are a little on the clunky side. I mean, that's not super surprising, given that it's not Ameritrash, but it's on the way to it. And yeah, actually, I would put it directly into that category In part because whenever you fight the zombie, you have to roll a die. Or if you're fighting a zombie, you bash them and the zombie's dead. But every time you move by a zombie, it gets to attack you. And the way it attacks you, it rolls a die, and it can either knock you down or miss or bite you. If it bites you, you get a wound. If you ever end your turn with a full complement of wounds, you die and you reanimate as a zombie. And now you have an alternate goal, which is to win by making sure that every player who's left alive is a zombie before anyone gets out the door. If you can turn all the other players into zombies, then all the zombies win. Of course, if you get killed once you're a zombie, then you're dead for good. Also, interestingly, if you get the antidote and then you get killed, then you're dead for good because you're a human. You're not infected with the zombie virus, which I think is kind of fun. All in all, it was a good time. If you know what kind of game you're getting in for, we had a lovely time fighting with each other and running around the school. Definitely a keeper in terms of my collection. Glad to have it as another game we can play on zombie-themed board game days, and I'm excited to give it a try again sometime. That's Student Bodies from Smirk and Dagger. Next up is a game from Grand Gamers Guild that I got to try thanks to my friend Paul, who backed the Kickstarter and thus had all sorts of goodies that wouldn't come with the base game. This is Endangered. Endangered is a cooperative game about saving a population of animals from a variety of environmental themed problems. The environmental themed problem that we played was a round of sea otters, and so the population we're trying to save is sea otters, and the environmental catastrophe is an oil slick. So what happens is each round you are going to take actions. Each person is a character with a special power, and they are interacting with the board in a couple ways. One, you can use some actions to manage the population of sea otters to try to help keep them alive. You can also use actions to try to manage these 8, I don't want to call them influencers, decision makers, important people. And these important people have influence cubes, so you can spend actions to put influence cubes on these important people. And each important person is convinced to help out the sea otters through some different win condition, often relating to the other influencers, but sometimes relating to the sea otter population or other things in the game. When you're playing a 4-player game, which we did, after 3 rounds, then there's a vote, and the vote, you survey the influencer people, and if 5 of them vote your way, then if you've met the conditions for 5 of them to vote in favor of saving the sea otters, then they do. Otherwise, you play another round, and if at the end of that 4th round you have met the conditions you needed, then they vote in your favor and you win. Now, there are a number of challenges keeping us from successfully fending off successfully ending the game. The main one being just that every turn, just like Pandemic or other games of this sort, you're drawing a problem, and that problem will be exacerbated by whatever's going on the board. It'll involve placing, oil slicks. It'll involve killing sea otters. It'll involve taking influence off or doing any number of things. Every now and again, some of the cards you draw are beneficial, but for the most part, the event cards are all bad, or mostly bad. The production design on Endangered is really nice. It's a fun-looking game. I love the little meeples that it comes with. The base game comes with, I think, tigers and sea lions, but in the expansion box, there are like 7 other creature species that have different challenges for you to play. I presume each one evolves slightly differently and plays slightly differently and has its own deck of event cards. We only played the sea lions to start, or the sea otters, excuse me. I keep saying sea lions. All in all, it was a fun game. I certainly enjoyed it, and if my friend were to bring it again and say, I really want to play this again, that I would definitely play. It wasn't my favorite. I'm not sure that I would ask to play it again. In part because it was fine, but I didn't feel like the challenges that it posed were distinct enough or new enough to make me really driven to go back again. There was an element in which the players kind of have to talk amongst each other because each person has a special power, and those special powers really are important for maintaining or succeeding at developing the influence you need. Because of that, if you don't have the right combination of powers, or if you aren't paying attention to what other people can do, you could get stuck. I also didn't mention how you get to take actions. There are a number of cards that allow for actions, and you can add additional actions. That part was actually pretty neat. There's a card that lets you add cards out of your hand into the tableau, or lets you play cards out of your hand. Some of the cards in your hand are just actions, and some of the cards out of your hand get added to the tableau and become additional worker spaces. On your turn, you roll 3 dice, and then you have to play the dice. The key is your dice stay out on the board until your next turn, and wherever you play, nobody can play the same number or lower. So if you roll a 6, wherever you play the 6 action, nobody else can play. There's one sort of low power bonus or low power general action that anyone can play on with any die. But all the good actions, whoever played there last with the highest die, no one else can play unless they play a higher die. So once you get to 6, you have effectively blocked that action off until your next turn, which is a pretty significant challenge and did make for interesting discussion and thought. One of the tools they give you around it is that you can take turns in whatever order you like. You don't have to go around the table. And that is crucial for solving the puzzle. Like I said, all in all, I thought Endangered was fine. There's some neat mechanisms in there, and it's well worth checking out if you get the opportunity, but it certainly didn't sing to me as an amazing cooperative game, and I don't see myself jealous that my friend has it and I don't. And I don't see myself, thinking about buying it anyway. So worth it checking out, and a really good theme, very involving, that when the events came out we would feel it, but ultimately a sort of middle of the road cooperative experience for me. That's Endangered. And finally, the third game is one that was on my shelf of opportunity for 7 months, something like that. This is the Carl Chuddick board game Blood of the Northmen. I picked this game up in retail. I did not back it on Kickstarter, but I remember having seen it on Kickstarter and being pretty interested. One of the designers that I generally find pretty intriguing is Carl Chuddick. He's, of course, the designer of Glory to Rome and Innovation and Motainai and Impulse, 4 games that I enjoy quite a bit. Motainai being my favorite of those, but Innovation is also very, very good. I haven't had much chance to play Glory to Rome or Impulse, so I don't know those ones as well, but they're all very good. But this is a board game, and I didn't really know much about it, but I found it for a good price, had Carl Chuddick's name on it, so I took a chance, and I'm really glad I did. So, Blood of the Northmen is a sort of chaotic area control game themed around Vikings, in which you play the leader of a Viking clan, and as such, you have 12 warbands at your disposal. These warbands are represented by a single miniature, get played on the board and moved around with the goal of either defeating other warbands or occupying villages. Sometimes there are other things that can get you points, but at least in the 2 games of this that I played, those were really the options. It was killing other warbands or occupying villages. Now that by itself doesn't really sound all that exciting, not something I would usually go in for, but I would say what makes this game really interesting is the Carl Chuddickness of it all. If you haven't played any of his games, one of the things that is a signature element, I would say particularly with regard to like Motainai, but also Innovation, and a little bit Glory to Rome, is that you have these multi-use cards. You have cards, and when you get them, you can use them for several things. The reason Motainai particularly resonates for me is that in Motainai, whenever you aren't taking an action, you can use that unused action to draw cards instead. This becomes an essential part of Blood of the Northmen. So the way Blood of the Northmen works, on your turn you're going to add 1 hex tile to the map. The edges of the hex tile have one of 4 different terrain types. There's forests, lakes, roads, and mountains. There's also empty, which just look like grassy plains, but those don't do anything. When you play the tile, for each forest side that you have, you can add one of your warbands to the table, or to that hex. For each lake side that you have, you can move 1 or 2 or 3, all in a group, warbands, from one tile to another, either through the grasslands, through the roads, or across a lake. In fact, if you're going across the lake, you can go through multiple tiles if there's a lake connected. For every side of the tile you add that has a forest, you can also move through forests, but it takes 2 movement actions. And then for every side of the tile that is mountainous, you can start a battle on one of the tiles where your warband is in the same place as someone else's. Now there's a ton of stuff going on, but at its heart, this complicated game where you have this tile, and the tile represents a whole bunch of different things you get to do. Like many games, it is really swingy, really fast. It takes about 45 minutes to play. Delightfully complicated, really neat battle system. I actually am really impressed with Blood of the Northmen, and I'm looking forward to playing it some more. The one negative that I will point out is that the pieces are all gray, which means that they're really hard to distinguish from one to another. They have different miniature shapes, but if they were painted, it would be nice. So I'm going to be painting them. Just a light wash to give them a color, probably. Have you played any of those 3 games? Have you played Endangered? Have you played Blood of the Northmen? Have you played... What was the first game I talked about? The first game I talked about. I don't remember. Have you played any of these 3 games? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know your experience playing them. Did you like them? If so, why? If not, why not? And let us know what you've been playing as well. You can send me a direct message, Wombat929 on Board Game Geek, or Brendan at rattleboxgames.com. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.